The void does not forgive rebellion. There are countless worlds scattered across the stars. But few understand the weight of their choices, for within the imperium of man, loyalty is not a virtue, but a law written in the blood of billions. When a world rises in defiance, whether through misguided independence, whispered heresy, or outright blasphemy, the response is never merciful. It is swift, it is absolute, and it is terrifying. From orbiting fleets that blot out the sun to ground armies that march like tidal waves, the Imperium does not ask for surrender. It demands erasure, and in the wake of that fury, nothing remains but ash, silence, and the echo of what might have been. These are not stories of victory or conquest. These are obituaries for planets that once dared to believe they could live without the Emperor. If you find yourself drawn deeper into these shadows, if the weight of history and the silence of ruined worlds stir something in you, then join us. Like, share, and subscribe so that this chronicle may reach more wandering souls across the void. For every tale of defiance is also a warning, and warnings are all that stand between survival and extinction. The silence before fire. The silence of a world awaiting judgment is unlike any other. It is not the natural stillness of a night sky or the hush of winter snowfall. It is heavier, denser, filled with the weight of things unspoken. On the hive world of Callian Prime, the silence came long before the first ship descended. Its people did not notice it at first. How could they? The manufactorums roared as always, their chimneys vomiting plumes of black smoke into the pale heavens. Voxcasters droned the usual hymns of devotion, their static-laced prayers echoing across the Ferrocrete plazas. Yet beneath that familiar noise, there was something missing, something that only the most attentive could feel. The absence of safety, of certainty, of the illusion that tomorrow would arrive unbroken. For Callian's governors had grown bold, too bold. They believed distance meant freedom, that their world's position at the edge of a sector spared them the burden of imperial tithe. The first shipments withheld were explained away with excuses: raids from orcs, storms in the warp, malfunctions in their forges. But each cycle passed, and still the grain shipments dwindled. Still the mineral quotas fell short. Reports drifted back to Terra, to the Administratum's endless vaults, and from there to the ears of those who did not forgive. Yet Callian continued, its rulers feasting in palaces of glass and steel, their pride as bright as the banners they raised above the governor's spire. Among the common folk, however, whispers stirred. Dock workers noticed the long silences on the void docks, where freighters once came and went with steady rhythm. Priests felt their sermons ring hollow, as though even the emperor's light struggled to reach the hearts of their congregation. Mothers hushed their children when they asked why soldiers drilled with grim faces in the plazas, why Arbite's patrols doubled in strength, why the night carried so many unmarked convoys along forgotten roads. The people did not know the word for it, but they felt it, dread seeping into the marrow of their lives. A single night burned this unease into certainty. The sky was clear, the stars bright, when every Vox channel across Callion cracked into sudden silence. No hymns, no decrees, no casual market chatter carried by the citywide networks. Just static. In the palaces, governors ordered technicians flogged for incompetence, unaware that the silence was not caused by machines, but by what had entered the void above them. For on that night, orbit shifted, Shadows fell across constellations as vast ships slipped from the warp, their hulls stretching like mountain ranges against the black. The Adeptus Administratum had not sent warnings. The Arbites had not explained. The Imperium does not threaten. It arrives. Those who saw the silhouettes first spoke in trembling voices of flying cathedrals, of warships whose prows carried the Emperor's sigil brighter than suns. They whispered of banners unfurling across kilometers of adamantine plating, of vox horns chanting litanies loud enough to rattle windows planet-side. The words were not clear, but the meaning was unmistakable. Judgment had come. Yet, for 3 long days, nothing descended. No landers, no thunder of artillery, no booming demands. Just orbiting titans, circling slowly, patiently, as if savoring the moment. In the cities below, the silence deepened until even the manufactorums seemed to stutter, their great pistons hammering with uncertain rhythm. In those 3 days, the people of Calian Prime learned what it meant to wait for fire. Children who once laughed at the sight of Arbites patrols now wept when they passed. Market stalls stood empty, fruit rotting in baskets as vendors fled to their shrines. Entire districts carried the smell of incense, burned in quantities so desperate that the smoke turned the air a choking gray. The faithful crowded into cathedrals, kneeling until their knees bled, reciting prayers until their tongues swelled. Priests told them to endure, that the emperor's gaze was merciful to the penitent, but the words felt hollow even as they spoke them, for all could see the ships above, and none mistook them for heralds of mercy. The governor, Lord Halbrecht Venar, tried to project calm. He addressed the people from the balcony of his spire, his robes a dazzling crimson, trimmed with golden aquila clasps. His voice magnified across the hive by vox amplifiers. The Imperium is our ally, our shield, he declared. These ships come not as executioners, but as protectors, summoned here by my council to drive away our Xenos foes and safeguard our trade. The crowd cheered, but the cheer was hollow, the kind that comes not from belief, but from fear of what happens if silence is mistaken for defiance. Behind the spire's walls, Venar's council was less united. His generals whispered of mustering the defense forces, of digging in across the hive's bastions. His ministers urged appeasement, frantic messages prepared with falsified quotas and counterfeit data slates to prove loyalty. And all the while, the orbiting ships remained still, their patience more terrifying than an assault, for the people knew, when gods circle above you, silence is not peace. It is the weight of judgment yet to fall. On the 3rd night, a sound broke the stillness, not the clash of weapons, not the roar of fire, a single voice, carried by Vox across every channel of Calian, deep, measured, absolute. You stand accused. The voice did not name them, did not list charges, did not explain. It did not need to. Every soul on the planet felt the words in their bones. The silence before had been heavy, but now it was crushing, pressing against the lungs, squeezing the heart. No one moved, no one dared speak. The voice had been neither arbits nor governor, neither priest nor soldier. It was the voice of the Imperium itself, faceless and immense. And in that moment, the people of Calian understood. The fire had not yet come, but it was inevitable. The hours that followed were suffocating. After the single phrase, "You stand accused," the Vox fell silent once more, leaving the populace adrift in uncertainty. On Calian Prime, Every corner of the hive world seemed to hold its breath. Families gathered in their homes, candles burning low as they whispered half-remembered prayers. Soldiers stood in parade formation, their lace guns clutched tight, sweat dripping down their brows, though no orders had been given. Even the air itself seemed to thicken, carrying the tang of ozone as if lightning were trapped in the skies. At the apex of the governor's spire, Lord Vanar raged. He smashed goblets of amasec against marble floors, shattered pick slates against walls already scarred by his fury. His advisors tried to soothe him, but the veneer of authority he once carried was unraveling with every passing hour. He had thought the Imperium distant, thought its administrators too tangled in their own bureaucracy to notice a single missing tithe. But here was proof of his arrogance, orbiting above his world in the form of warships vast enough to darken the stars. His generals pleaded for permission to raise the void shields and ready the planetary defense batteries. We must show strength, they urged. If we bend our knees now, they will burn us regardless. Let us fire first and carve a path to negotiation. But Vanar faltered. Deep within his marrow, he knew such defiance would not end in negotiation, but in obliteration. The Imperium did not parley with worlds that raised weapons against its fleets. The Imperium erased them. Still, pride gnawed at him, a parasite he could not kill. To surrender was to admit failure, to admit weakness before his court, his people, and perhaps most intolerably, before himself. Down in the hives, the mood shifted from dread to hysteria. Rumors bloomed like spores, spreading faster than Arbite's patrols could contain them. Some claimed the Adeptus Astartes had come, their drop pods poised to fall like meteors through the night sky. Others swore the ships above belonged to the Inquisition, and that their world was doomed not to occupation, but to exterminate us, its soil reduced to ash for sins unnamed. The whispers twisted further still, that the Emperor himself had turned his face away from Callian, that their prayers no longer reached Terra, that their children were already condemned before they even drew breath. In the manufactorum districts, work ceased entirely. Servitors stood idle, augmetic limbs twitching in mechanical confusion as workers fled their stations. Without orders, the great machines of Callian ground to a halt, silence cascading down avenues where once pistons had hammered day and night. It was as if the planet itself had stopped breathing, awaiting its sentence. And then, at dawn on the fourth day, the fire came, not from weapons, but from light. The clouds split apart as a vast dropship descended, a cathedral of steel and adamantium painted in the stark black of the Adeptus Arbites. Its engines screamed like the judgment of angels, rattling windows and shattering glass across the hive. It did not land in the plazas where the masses could gather. It landed at the very heart of the governor's palace, crushing gardens, fountains, and marble statues beneath its colossal bulk. From its ramp marched the enforcers of imperial law. Their armor was black, their helms crowned with visors, like the gaze of unyielding predators. Each carried a maul that crackled with caged power. Each bore the sigil of the Aquila emblazoned across their chest. The Adeptus Arbites did not stride as men. They advanced as inevitability given form. The governor's guards quailed. Some raised weapons, their hands shaking. Others fell to their knees without a fight, begging for mercy that would never come. The Arbites did not pause to address them. They marched in perfect synchrony, their vox grills chanting liturgies of law as they stormed through the palace halls. Every word of their chant was a nail in the coffin of Kalion's defiance. The emperor protects, the emperor judges, the emperor condemns. At the foot of the spire's throne, Lord Vanar awaited, his crimson robes rumpled, his crown of office tilted askew. He tried to muster dignity, tried to lift his chin as though he still commanded the world around him. "You cannot enter here without leave," he shouted, his voice cracking. "This is my hall, my world, my right as governor." The Arbite's commander did not slow. His vox grill crackled with a single phrase. "You are mistaken." What followed was not a battle, but a demonstration. The Arbites struck with precision, their shock mauls dropping guards one by one in crackling bursts of electricity. Blood mixed with the acrid tang of ozone. Screams echoed down the marble corridors. Yet the Arbites showed no rage, no hesitation, only the cold certainty of law enacted. Within minutes, the governor's retinue lay broken across the throne room floor, and Lord Vanar himself was dragged forward in chains of black steel. For the first time in his life, he begged. He begged for his children, for his titles, for the lives of his people. He invoked the emperor's name, invoked the rights of nobility, invoked anything that might stave off the judgment looming over him. But the Arbites did not listen. They did not come to negotiate. They came to deliver him before the Imperium's court of fire. And so, Lord Vanar was carried from his throne, past his courtiers, weeping in silence, past the shattered statues of saints, past the burning wreckage of his gardens, where the Arbite's lander still smoked. As he was taken up the ramp, his voice broke into a scream that carried across the hive, amplified by the Arbite's vox channels for all to hear. "Mercy, mercy for Callion." But there was no mercy. The ships above remained silent, the people below wept, and Callion Prime stood on the razor's edge. Its governor gone, its fate yet unspoken, its silence heavier than ever before. The days that followed Lord Vanar's capture bled into one another, each marked by fear sharper than any blade. The Arbites did not immediately pronounce sentence. Instead, they established their presence with methodical brutality, turning entire districts into staging grounds for imperial order. Curfews were imposed, enforced not by stern warnings, but by cracking mauls and bolt pistol executions. Loud hailers blared ceaselessly from armored carriers, their voices mechanical and merciless. Compliance is your salvation. Obedience is survival. Defiance is death. In the sprawl of Hive Turnus, where millions crowded into towers that clawed toward the smog-stained skies, the people began to vanish. At first, it was the governor's ministers, those who had feasted in marble halls, while quotas went unpaid. They were dragged into the streets, bound in chains, and loaded onto transports that rose toward the waiting ships above. The Arbites gave no explanation, no trial, no word of return. The absence of these figures might have sparked joy among the oppressed masses, but the joy withered quickly, for the purge did not stop at nobles, administratum clerks, overseers, manufactorum foremen, even vox operators. Any who bore responsibility for the world's governance were torn away in the night. The void above grew ever more crowded. Great imperial barges floated like iron saints, their hulls engraved with scripture that glowed faintly in the darkness. From their flanks descended processional landers, disgorging priests and confessors whose voices thundered louder than the hive's machinery. They walked the streets clad in robes of black and crimson, each bearing relics that caught the sun and reflected it in blinding shards. They demanded the people kneel, demanded they recite litanies of loyalty until their throats grew raw. Those who faltered, even for a heartbeat, were marked by inked sigils upon their brows, then taken into custody and never seen again. In this theater of dread, silence was no longer emptiness, it was strategy. Families learned to live without sound, without laughter, without prayer spoken too loudly. Markets, that once buzzed with barter and trade, now carried only the scrape of boots on stone. Even children, once defiant in their innocence, learned the lesson quickly. They clutched their mothers' skirts and stared wide-eyed at the patrolling enforcers, lips pressed tight, as though a single word might summon doom. Yet beneath this enforced stillness, defiance smoldered. In the shadowed underhives, where the Arbites dared not walk without entire squads, whispers of rebellion took root. Gangs once concerned only with territory and scraps began speaking of vengeance. Smugglers hoarded weapons, laze guns once bound for off-world shipments hidden in sealed tunnels. The people of Callian had not forgotten their governor's words, hollow though they were. This is our world, and for some, that lie had become a truth worth dying for. But the Arbites anticipated this. Their silence had not been indecision, it had been bait. 1 week after Vaynar's capture, the Underhive erupted. Armed men and women surged from tunnels, firing into patrols, cutting down priests in smoke-choked streets. For a heartbeat, it seemed the spark of resistance might spread, might set the hive alight. Yet almost immediately, the trap was sprung. From the heavens descended gunships, their prows marked not with the sigil of the Arbites, but with the heraldry of the Astra Militarum. Regiments clad in flak armor and draped in the banners of distant worlds stormed the hive, their boots pounding in endless rhythm, their lace guns burning with relentless fury. These were not enforcers of law, they were executioners of will. They did not discriminate between rebels and bystanders. They purged entire districts, collapsing hab blocks with missile fire, torching manufactorums with promethium until steel ran molten. In their advance, the silence of Callian was shattered, replaced by the scream of dying millions and the thunder of imperial wrath. From the palace spire, chained and broken, Lord Vaynar was forced to watch. His eyes, once filled with pride, were wide with horror as the Arbites' commander held his head toward the burning hives. "This is the price of arrogance," the commander intoned, voice grinding through his vox grill. "Your people burn because you believed yourself greater than the Emperor's law." And Callian burned. For days, the smoke blotted out the sun. For nights, the glow of fire turned the skies a dull crimson. The silence that had once suffocated the world was gone, replaced by the ceaseless dirge of destruction. Yet even amidst the roar of war machines and the endless screams, a deeper silence endured. The silence of hope extinguished, of futures erased, of a world realizing that nothing they could say, nothing they could beg, would alter what had been set in motion. When the last manufactorum collapsed, when the last hab-block fell into rubble, the Arbite's vox crackled again across the planet. The same voice as before, steady and cold. "Judgment is not yet complete. You have been found wanting. You will learn obedience, or you will know annihilation." The people of Callian trembled, for they understood now that the fire was only the beginning. ChatGPT said, the fires smoldered for weeks, and in their acrid smoke, the people of Callian began to understand what it meant to live beneath the eye of the Imperium. The Astra Militarum did not withdraw after their purge of the underhives. They entrenched themselves, carving out bastions of steel and ferrocrete in the heart of the hive cities. Their banners hung from towers. Their patrols marched ceaselessly through plazas once filled with laughter. What remained of Callion's population moved through streets littered with rubble and ash, the corpses of rebels left to rot as warnings, and always, high above, the warships circled, patient as carrion birds. Lord Vanar, the man who once strutted in crimson robes, was paraded through the hives in chains. His body bore the marks of humiliation, his hair shaved, his flesh branded with the sigil of treachery. Arbit's loudhailers declared his crimes at every intersection, amplifying his cries as he was dragged through the streets. He was no longer a governor, no longer even a man. He was a living sermon, a warning to every citizen that the emperor's judgment could not be evaded. When his voice cracked from pleading, when his throat was too raw to beg, the Arbuts silenced him with gags and continued the march, his broken form displayed as though he were another relic of law. For some, this spectacle killed the last spark of resistance. Men who had once whispered of rebellion now turned their eyes to the ground, their mouths sealed shut in fear of Arbides' ears. Mothers taught their children not to pray too loudly, lest their words be judged heretical. Even priests faltered, their homilies hollow, their candles burning low in cathedrals that stank of desperation. The silence of obedience returned, but it was no longer the silence of waiting. It was the silence of survival. And yet, not all bent the knee. In the ruins of Hive Turnus, where the Militarum's bombardments had reduced districts to rubble, remnants of the rebellion endured. They were not organized armies, but clusters of desperate men and women who refused to yield. They struck from tunnels, ambushed patrols, set fire to Arbite's outposts in the dark. Their weapons were few, their numbers dwindling, but their hatred burned bright. To the Arbites and Militarum, they were vermin to be exterminated. To the surviving populace, they were ghosts, proof that defiance had not been entirely crushed. The Imperium responded with a new form of terror. At dawn, great vox horns flared to life across Callion, summoning the populace to gather in their plazas. The Arbites marched prisoners, captured rebels, priests accused of doubt, even children whose families had been deemed suspect, into the squares. There, in front of weeping crowds, they were executed, not with a soldier's bullet, but with spectacle. Shockmalls shattered skulls, flamers turned bodies into shrieking pyres, guillotines, ancient machines of judgment, fell again and again until the cobblestones ran slick with blood. Each execution was accompanied by sermons, droning voices declaring, "This is law, this is obedience, this is the emperor's will." The silence that followed these executions was not the silence of fear alone. It was the silence of broken spirit. Men staggered back to their habs without speaking. Women clutched their children so tightly they left bruises. The air itself seemed drained, as though words had been stolen from the world. Callion no longer breathed. It endured. And still, the Arbites' commander waited. Still, the voice that had first pronounced accusation remained silent in the void above. The people asked themselves why. Why not destroy them fully? Why not cleanse the planet in holy fire and be done? Some whispered that the Imperium was merciful, that it sought repentance. Others muttered darker thoughts, that the Imperium drew power from their suffering, that their terror was itself an offering to a god who demanded not faith, but fear. In the immaterium, faint ripples stirred. Psychers, hidden among the populace, dreamt of burning thrones, of chains forged from screams, of a great figure watching from a throne of light with hollow eyes. These visions spread in hushed murmurs, adding another layer to the silence. For if the emperor truly saw them, if his gaze rested upon Callian, then their suffering was not unseen, and if he did not, then perhaps they had already been abandoned. When the Arbite's commander finally spoke again, his voice echoed through every channel, across every hive, into every home. The silence before fire is at an end. Judgment descends, and all across Callian, hearts froze, for they knew that what had come before was not judgment, but preparation. The true reckoning was only now beginning.